What would you do if your elderly father collapsed in front of you, and the only thing standing between him and an ambulance was a woman named Karen blocking the driveway with her SUV screaming about HOA parking rules? This wasn't a prank, this was my real life. And what happened next shocked not just my family but the entire neighborhood, including the police. My name's Tyler, and up until that day, I never had a single problem with anyone in the HOA, but this one neighbor who crowned herself the unofficial queen of the community took everything too far, and when my dad needed help, she turned a medical emergency into a power trip, and trust me, she messed with the wrong family, because the moment that ambulance showed up and couldn't reach us, the clock started ticking for her arrest. It all started on a Sunday morning. My dad, 74, was over helping me clean out the garage. He bent down to grab a box and suddenly collapsed, clutching his chest. My heart dropped. I shouted for my wife to call 911 while I tried to help him stay conscious. The ambulance was there in under 4 minutes, lights flashing, siren blaring, but as they tried to pull into the driveway, they slammed on the brake. There was a car, a massive silver SUV, parked directly across the bottom of our driveway, and standing beside it, hands on hips, was Karen, our HOA president, yelling something about how the ambulance isn't registered for resident entry. The paramedics jumped out trying to get past her, but Karen stepped in front of them waving a clipboard, claiming that emergency vehicles needed advance clearance from the HOA. I ran down the driveway shouting that my dad was having a heart attack. Karen turned to me with the coldest look I've ever seen. She said, "Your father should have stayed inside if he's that fragile. This neighborhood has rules." I could feel my blood boiling. The medics begged her to move, but she refused, saying she was documenting the violation. As precious seconds ticked away, my father was gasping for air, and Karen, she was standing between him and the help he needed. The lead medic radioed dispatch, asking for police assistance. While I sprinted back inside, grabbed my keys, and helped my dad into my truck. By the time I reversed around him vehicle, he was barely conscious. We got to the hospital just in time, but the nightmare didn't end there, because back home the police had arrived and found Karen still standing in front of the ambulance, still ranting about neighborhood regulations. And when the officer asked her to move her vehicle, she smiled and said, "This is private property, you have no authority here." Wrong move. The officer gave her one final warning. Karen laughed and said she was enforcing the HOA bylaws. That's when he told her she was under arrest for obstructing emergency services, and in front of her own Ring doorbell camera, she was handcuffed and placed in the back of the squad car. She shrieked that she was being assaulted, that she would sue every one of us, but her own video showed the truth. She blocked an ambulance in an emergency. Neighbors started filming, some even clapping. One woman shouted, "That's what you get for thinking you're above everyone." Later that evening, I returned home from the hospital. My dad was stable, but still under observation, and as I pulled into the driveway, a crowd had formed on our street. Everyone was whispering, sharing the video. Apparently, Karen's arrest had gone viral on the neighborhood app. Someone posted a clip of her yelling, "This is a gated community, not a crime zone." The comments were brutal. People shared their own stories of how she'd threatened to fine them for things like mailboxes being too colorful or lawns being 2 inches too high. Turns out, we weren't the only victims of her power trip. Over the next few days, the HOA board held an emergency meeting, and the stories poured in. One couple said Karen had demanded to inspect their garage to ensure compliance with storage standards. Another neighbor showed photos of warning letters she left on cars that parked half an inch over a line. Karen had treated the HOA like her personal kingdom, and now everyone was seeing her for who she really was. The police also reached out. They needed a full report of what happened that day. I told them everything from the moment my dad collapsed to Karen blocking the paramedics. They said she could be facing serious charges, obstruction of emergency services, criminal trespass, and even reckless endangerment. But Karen wasn't done yet. While out on bail, she filed a formal complaint against paramedics, claiming they intimidated her. She also emailed the HOA saying she was being targeted and that she deserved a public apology. This woman, who nearly cost my father his life, now wanted us to say sorry. The board didn't buy it. They immediately suspended her from all HOA duties pending an internal review. But the pressure didn't stop there. The local news picked up the story. Headline read, "HOA president arrested for blocking ambulance." They interviewed a few neighbors who called her behavior criminally selfish. And guess what? The video of her arrest hit over 500 zeros. 0 views in 2 days. Suddenly, our quiet community was on every news feed. People started mailing in letters calling for Karen to be banned from HOA activity permanently, and then something shocking happened. An HOA board member confessed publicly that Karen had been faking votes to keep herself in power, that her re-election was just smoke and mirrors. The entire system she built was crumbling. At the next community meeting, over 50 residents showed up, and one by one they voiced their outraged stories of her trespassing, threatening fines, blocking deliveries, even screaming at kids for playing too loudly. Karen sat in back stone, faced silent until a little girl stood up. She said, "Why didn't Miss Karen let the ambulance help Mr. Tyler's dad? That was really mean." The room went quiet, and for the first time Karen looked ashamed, but it was too late. Her reign was officially over. The board voted unanimously to remove her from all positions. They also proposed a new rule that any emergency vehicle must always be granted immediate access, no matter what. I added one more suggestion, that anyone who obstructs emergency responders be permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership role. It passed instantly. Karen had not only destroyed her own credibility, she inspired real change in the community. But she wasn't done making things worse for herself. She hired an attorney to sue the HOA, me, and even the paramedics, claiming emotional trauma. But her lawsuit didn't get far because our local fire department released the official incident report, which clearly stated Karen knowingly blocked emergency medical access. After being asked multiple times to move, the document alone shut down any chance of her case moving forward. Her lawyer dropped her, and she was left to face the criminal charges on her own. While I was contacted by the city council, they were considering creating a new ordinance to penalize anyone who interferes with emergency vehicles in residential zones, all because of this one horrifying incident. Something good was finally coming from the chaos Karen created. The day of her trial, a crowd formed outside the courthouse. People from the neighborhood came, some in support of my dad, some just to see the downfall of Karen. Inside, the judge reviewed the footage, heard the testimonies, and when the verdict came, it was clear Karen was guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 30 days in county jail plus community service and a fine of $5,000. The judge said, "Your actions could have led to a preventable death. This court will not tolerate such negligence." Justice had finally been served when Karen was taken into custody. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just looked straight ahead. And as she was led away, I felt something lift off my chest. My dad recovered fully. He's back to working on projects in the garage, even jokes that he now has a Karen story of his own. The community began healing too. A new HOA president was elected, one who believed in fairness, communication, and most importantly, compassion. Karen had ruled with fear, but in the end she was brought down by her own arrogance. The funny thing is, Karen could have just moved her car. That's all it would have taken to avoid everything, but she was so obsessed with control that she forgot basic humanity. Her downfall wasn't caused by any outside force. It was her own decisions piled up until they collapsed on top of her. Sometimes justice doesn't come right away, but when it does, it hits like a freight train, and in this case it came with flashing red lights and a siren. Now whenever I walk through the neighborhood, people nod and smile. Kids ride their bikes freely, no longer afraid of Karen yelling from her porch. Even the HOA board feels lighter. We've started monthly block parties and emergency preparedness program, all because of one moment, a crisis that exposed the rot and forced us to clean house. Karen's name is now a cautionary tale, a reminder that power without empathy always ends badly, and that community only works when we protect each other. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: no rule, no clipboard, no personal ego is more important than someone's life. My dad got lucky, but what if we hadn't been able to drive him ourselves? What if those extra 2 minutes had cost him everything, all because someone wanted to enforce a parking policy? Let that sink in. And next time you see someone standing in the way of help, don't stay silent, speak up, step in, and do the right thing. Thanks for watching this story unfold. Have you ever dealt with a Karen in your neighborhood, or someone who put rules above people? Share your story in the comments. Let's shine a light on the everyday heroes and expose the ones who think they're untouchable. Hit that like button if you believe people should come before policy, and don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic real life stories, because here justice doesn't sleep, and neither do we. See you in the next one. Stay safe, stay kind, and keep your driveways clear.